Thank you very much. And again, you're to be congratulated, Michael, because you kept within the time also. I hope it's not going to continue, because at this rate we'll be all going home much too soon. David, it's now your opportunity to reply, and you have 7 minutes to reply.
Well, there were a lot of points raised by Michael there, so if you want me to take longer, I certainly can. Quite a number of points there, and I just want to pick up on as many of them as I can within the 7 minutes, and perhaps come back to a few more if necessary in the final talk that I gave. The first thing that I want to look at concerns the relationship between science and belief in God. Michael describes a scenario whereby what we have is this unbreakable, I'm not sure what the word was he used, but this unbreakable chain, this progress of science, that it's one-way traffic, that scientific explanations remove religious explanations, and ultimately I think the suggestion is that there's no more room for God. Now, it seems to me that this is a remarkable caricature of the history of the relationship between science and religion. The late Colin Russell, a historian of science, put it like this. He said the common belief that the actual relations between religion and science over the last few centuries have been marked by deep and enduring hostility is not only historically inaccurate, but actually a caricature so grotesque that what needs to be explained is how it could possibly have achieved any degree of respectability. To take a couple of examples as to why that's the case, let's suppose we consider Kepler discovering his laws of planetary motion, or Michael mentioned Newton with the law of gravity. Now, did either of those people think that in terms of making this scientific breakthrough that they had removed the need for God? That this was getting rid of God and the onward march of science and rationality against belief in God? Certainly not. They were both theists, and many of the people in the history of science, as I alluded to earlier, were devout believers in God. They didn't see a conflict. They expected to find laws in the universe because they believed in God, so there was no conflict going on at all here. Now, Michael also mentioned thousands of gods and how we would establish which one of them it was. Well, I think again this is an important link here, and I'll only touch on it briefly, but I think there's a point here about distinguishing between theism and polytheism. Christians are monotheists. We believe that there is one God. But there are also polytheistic religions, and the polytheistic religions believe in many gods, and they often associate them with aspects of nature, of the natural world. And of course, for polytheism, once science explains that part of nature, there is a problem. But theism isn't like that. Theism talks about a God who stands behind, who's transcendent over the entire creation. Let me briefly touch on the size of the universe. Michael considers the vastness of the universe, that it's just highly implausible to think that this was all for our benefit. But why think that it's all for our benefit? I don't think that. I think that a universe with so much majestic beauty in it and order, God would have good reason to create that, whether it was for our benefit or not. So I don't think it is simply for our benefit. And indeed it's related to the fine-tuning. Martin Rees, the astronomer royal, puts it like this. He says the very hugeness of our universe, which seems at first to signify how unimportant we are in the cosmic scheme, is actually entailed by our existence. This is not to say that there couldn't have been a smaller universe, only that we could not have existed in it. So actually, for our existence, a large universe is required. Let me move on to the point about the universe not being fine-tuned for life. Most of it is empty. There is no life. Well, that's not what the fine-tuning argument is about. The fine-tuning is not that the universe is suitable for life everywhere, but that the constraints are such that for life to occur anywhere at all within the universe requires this high degree of precision. So it's the fine-tuning provides the conditions where life is possible. That's the argument. And so the size of the universe and the fact that there's not much life in it is irrelevant. And as for the fact that we evolved, well, again, evolution doesn't enter the picture here in terms of the fine-tuning. The fine-tuning requires to the first moments of the universe. So evolution is irrelevant to the question. Now, a number of other points. The cause of the universe. Could it not be natural? A natural cause of the universe? I don't think that's very plausible. I think the concern here is that there's good evidence for a beginning to the universe. That's a complete beginning of all physical reality. And if that's the case, then the cause of the universe cannot be physical. Indeed, the idea is that there's a beginning to both space and time, so that the cause of the universe, arguably, is not only not physical, but is also outside of time. This cause must also be unimaginably powerful. And the fine-tuning points to this cause being intelligent. This is beginning to sound like God, I would suggest. Morality. One of the things that I think Michael and I have in common is in terms of morality. We both agree that we can recognize morality. We can recognize right and wrong, and I pointed that out in my earlier talk. However, the question is not whether we can recognize them. The question is what the foundation for them is. And from an atheistic perspective, my concern is, where do these values come from? Where do they come into the picture in an atheistic universe? Michael elsewhere has said that where they come from is evolution produced them. But the difficulty with this explanation is that it's guilty of the genetic fallacy. Evolution produces all sorts of things. Michael rightly identifies the importance of compassion. Now let's suppose that evolution can account for the existence of compassion. Well, as Richard Dawkins points out, evolution can also account for the existence of xenophobia. But we don't think that's a good thing. The idea that we can explain the origins of something doesn't make it true or false, right or wrong. That's the genetic fallacy. And so I think Michael hasn't given us an account of why there can be an objective morality. So that's something I think he still needs to address. There are a number of points relating to Jesus, the resurrection, and the Bible, but my 7 minutes are up, so I'll come back to those later.